Welcome to the Belly Button Window channel and episode 37 of the Jimi Hendrix story, like you've never heard it before. In this episode, we deep dive into August of 1969, Jimi's Moroccan escape, Gypsies, Suns and Rainbows, and the Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period. Between August 1st and 5th, Jimi Hendrix embarked on an adventure to Morocco, described by Deering Howe as Jimi's only vacation, where he briefly escaped the pressures of his career under Michael Jeffrey's management. They traveled from New York to Marrakech, via Paris to meet friends, including the Franco-Moroccan Stella Douglas and Colette Mimram, one of Jimi's great loves. They spent several weeks exploring the country, shopping for Moroccan items such as rugs, outrageous clothes and hashish, of course. While returning from Morocco, Jimi flew back to New York via Paris, where he mysteriously disappeared for 2 days. Deering Howe later recounted that Jimi had met Brigitte Bardot at Orly Airport and decided to miss his flight in order to pursue a romantic encounter with the famous sex symbol. Rumors of this liaison have persisted for many years, with Univibes, the international Jimi Hendrix magazine, attempting to uncover the truth, which hitherto still remains elusive. Hendrix author, Charles R. Cross, elaborated on the story, explaining that Jimi had indeed chosen to miss his flight so as to spend 2 secretive days with Bardot, while his management searched for him in vain. This impulsive act highlighted Jimi's joie de vivre and his need to escape the relentless demands of his career. Cross also noted that this trip was likely the best and perhaps the only vacation Jimi ever had. Deering Howe recalled how much Jimi enjoyed himself in Africa, laughing more than ever and immersing himself in the culture and people, stating that, in Africa, Jimi experienced a sense of freedom, as his race and fame were irrelevant. It was a rare reprieve from his rock star persona, allowing him to enjoy life without the pressures of his public image. Charles R. Cross also recounted an incident from Jimi's trip to Africa that profoundly affected him and later haunted his dreams. During their stay, they met Colette Mimram's relatives, including her grandfather, a tribal leader, and his new wife, a renowned clairvoyant who worked for the King of Morocco. Despite knowing nothing about Jimi, she recognized his artistic genius upon meeting him. She humorously ran her fingers over his head and face, reading his features, and her words, translated from French, made Jimi laugh. However, that evening, she issued a chilling prophecy to Colette, predicting they would no longer be friends in a year because of other women. Although Colette found this surprising, it wasn't an extraordinary prediction given the free-spirited 1960s. What happened next, though, deeply unsettled both Jimi and Colette. The clairvoyant offered to read Jimi's tarot cards, and he agreed, gathering with his friends around a table. The first card drawn was the Star, which brought smiles, as the woman explained it signified grace and being surrounded by many people. But the mood shifted when the next card drawn was the Death card. She hurriedly reassured Colette that it symbolized rebirth, not literal death. However, during the moments of translation, Jimi was transfixed by the card, exclaiming, "I'm going to die!" His friends tried to calm him, explaining the various interpretations of tarot cards. Yet, Jimi couldn't shake off the card's ominous message. Having previously dreamt in 1966 that he would become a star, a vision that had come true, he took the Death card as a dire omen. Over the following months, he repeatedly echoed this grim prediction, varying between dying in 3 months to not living past 30. Colette recalled urging him to stop talking so negatively, to which he replied, "It's not negative. It's just the way it is. I'm sorry. I'm not ready to go." Thursday, August 7th. Jimi flies from Paris to New York City. He then heads to the Shokan house, the country home near Woodstock. While at the Shokan house, Jimi participates in jam sessions, including undated performances of Message to Love and Machine Gun. He also jams with alto saxophonist David Sanborn, saxophonist Sam Rivers, and other musicians. After Jimi returned from Morocco, life at the Shokan house settled into a comfortable rhythm. With the Woodstock Festival looming in mid-August, Jimi saw it as an opportunity to unveil his new band, Gypsy, Suns and Rainbows. This goal infused the rehearsals and jam sessions with purpose and anticipation. However, uncertainty lingered over the drumming position. Would it be Mitch or Buddy Miles? According to Jerry Velez, Mitch was always hard to get, by which he means Mitch might not show up to rehearsals. The band rehearsed with Mitch, but there were doubts about his availability. Jimi hoped to retain Mitch, but he wasn't sure if he would fit into a group where everyone else was a close companion, a brother. Among these companions were other black musicians like James Scott, known as Vishwa, who had also joined the Shokan entourage. According to Mitch Mitchell, "I'm not sure if the tour was supposed to end in Denver, but I assume so. Afterward, I went back to New York for a few days before returning to England to the house I recently bought in Sussex. Later, I flew back to New York for some sessions with Betty Davis, Miles's ex-wife, before returning to England once again. Jimi and I stayed in touch over the phone, but we both really needed a break from the grind, with the tour and the problems with Noel and all the rest. At the beginning of August, I got a call to come to a rural retreat near Woodstock. It was odd because Jimi wasn't exactly a country boy. He enjoyed looking at the countryside from a moving car but never wanted to stop. The management had rented this enormous mansion, a really grim place. Jimi had brought along Billy Cox and his wife Brenda and Larry Lee, a guitarist Jimi had known for years. Larry hadn't seen Jimi for ages and suddenly had to take in this whole new Hendrix. Larry started wearing a scarf around his head because he thought that's what hippies did. It looked very strange. He was a nice man and an adequate guitarist, but did Hendrix really need a rhythm guitarist? Also around were two conga players, Jerry Velez, brother of singer Martha Velez, and Juma Sultan. Both were good players, but with two or more drummers or percussionists, it either works well or gets competitive. Unfortunately, they couldn't keep time. The band was a shambles. They had apparently been working for about 10 days when I arrived, but you'd never have known it. The band was grim, and the house was grim. The only humorous moment was when Eric Barrett, who was there to look after Jimi and try to get people out of bed to work, fired an air pistol at Mike Jeffries' approaching Jeep and shattered the windscreen. That was the only funny moment, other than watching Hendrix attempt to ride a horse, which was definitely a sight to behold. We were there mainly because we were contracted to play at the Woodstock Festival. I got the feeling that Jimi realized it wasn't working and just wanted to get the gig over with and start working again. We rehearsed at the house, which wasn't actually in Woodstock, but about 12 miles from any kind of civilization, for about a week or 10 days. It was probably the only band I've ever been involved with that simply didn't improve over that length of time. Hendrix author, John McDermott, goes as far as to say that Mitch Mitchell was becoming increasingly frustrated with Gypsy's Sons and Rainbow's inabilities, and many of those present, from Leslie Adair to Jerry Stickles, sensed his frustration with the band's distinct lack of cohesion. Mitchell could see little progress and, as a result, felt that continuing with the structure was a waste of time. In his opinion, using 3 percussionists cluttered the Hendrix sound. At first, Jimi was not ready to accept this, hoping that over time the band could be whipped into shape. To help track their progress, Hendrix contacted Eddie Kramer, asking him to break from the studio project and come up to the Shokan retreat and install some proper recording equipment. Kramer agreed and borrowed a 4-track machine, professional microphones, and an improved PA system. Up until that time, Hendrix had been utilizing his own domestic reel-to-reel tape machine. Kramer took a weekend to organize Hendrix's requests, even engineering a few jam sessions himself. Sunday, August 10th, and Jimi Hendrix graced the small Tinker Street Cinema in Woodstock. This converted church building was a familiar venue for musicians associated with Juma Sultan's Aboriginal Music Society, who often performed there on Sunday evenings. Hendrix made a public appearance on the cramped stage, joined by these musicians as well as 2 percussionists from Santana, who were coincidentally in the area for a gig. Without Mitch Mitchell, Hendrix couldn't fully assess the potential of his new lineup, but the jam session still showcased a vibrant mix of talent. Participants included Juma Sultan, Jerry Velez, Earl Cross on trumpet, Ali Carboy on drums, Michael Carabello on congas, and Jose Chapito Arias on percussion. Despite the absence of his usual drummer, Hendrix's impromptu performance hinted at the powerful show he would deliver just a week later to a crowd thousands of times larger. Setlist for the evening included a couple of versions of Isabella, an instrumental jam, beginning If 6 Was 9, The Dance, The Sundance, and Message to Love. Between Monday the 11th of August and Saturday the 16th of August, rehearsals continue for the Woodstock concert at the Shokan retreat with Gypsy Sons and Rainbows. Then, Sunday the 17th of August. Jimi arrives at the Woodstock site after some transportation hassles. Mitch recalled, "At Woodstock, We were supposed to fly in by helicopter, but because there was mud everywhere, Mike Jeffrey had these ex-CIA guys drive us in a couple of rickety old station wagons, which took about 5 hours just because of the traffic and the mass of people. We were due to go on stage at midnight to 1 a.m., as we were the headliners of the 3-day event. When we eventually arrived at the site, we asked, "Where is the dressing room?" We were told there were no dressing rooms, and they pointed to a cottage across a rotted, muddy field about a half a mile away. The Woodstock Music and Arts Festival began in the spring of 1969 as a germ of an idea in the mind of Michael Lang, of Miami Pop Festival fame, and his partner, an ex-Capitol Records executive, Artie Kornfeld. The original scheme was to build a studio complex in the Woodstock area, where so many New York musicians were now living, and press launch it with a festival. Lang found 2 rich young men, John Roberts and Joel Rosenman, looking for some exciting investment potential. Once they started thinking about who they could invite, it didn't take long for the studio idea to recede in favor of the festival, as Lang realized that here was an opportunity to go down in history as host to the biggest rock party ever held, and using somebody else's money. The problems really started about 30 days prior to the festival date, when the residents surrounding the site at Wallkill forced through a change in local bylaws and forced Woodstock Ventures out. A dairy farmer, Max Yazga, sickened by the bad press constantly heaped on young people, came to the rescue and rented out his land in Bethel so the festival could take place. Sadly, as has been exhaustively documented, the story from then on was one of staff incompetence on the one hand, and straightforward greed and extortion by those whose services were brought in by the organizers at the last minute. As the opening day on the 15th of August approached, the festival lurched from one crisis to another. On-site organization was chaotic. An estimated 30,000 people had camped out before any security, food, or medical aid was in place. Trying to get entrance money from this number was deemed suicidal, and it wasn't too long before the whole thing was declared a free festival. Out of an estimated peak crowd of 400,000, probably only those who bought tickets in advance, about 60,000, paid to get in. Arrangements for performers were equally shambolic. The managers of several bands asked for money up front because they could sense that the organizers were in trouble. They needed helicopters to fly in many of the artists, but all the approach roads were jammed solid as far as the eye could see, and most bands went on several hours late. While holed up in Shokan, Jimi was unhappy about media reports of the size of the crowd, and with the governor of New York declaring the site a disaster area, and so on. Add to that, he hated playing large crowds. Jimi was due to go on at midnight on the Sunday, but for whatever reason, at 4 in the afternoon, he was still saying he wouldn't do it. According to Hendrix author John McDermott, Eddie Kramer was hired by the festival's promoters to engineer the field recordings, with the intention of shaping an album from the best performances. Kramer eagerly anticipated recording Hendrix live, having only done so once before, at Gulfstream Park in Miami on May 18, 1968. After witnessing the experience's outstanding performance at Madison Square Garden on May 18, 1969, Kramer hoped that the festival's atmosphere would inspire Hendrix to surpass that performance. Leslie Ade, recalling the scene, described Hendrix's condition at Woodstock. She noted that while other artists had to crowd into backstage tents, Hendrix was stationed in a farm shack. Jerry Morrison, a Jeffrey aide, had come to get me, and I could see that Hendrix was ill, dosed, I'm afraid, by drinking the water backstage. Some water sources had indeed been laced with hallucinogens. He seemed really sick or really high and was sweating bullets. I was feeding him vitamin C, fruit, and having him suck on lemon slices. As we sat there, he seemed very nervous and didn't think he could pull it off. He didn't feel the band knew the songs well enough or had enough rehearsal. He was stressed out. However, as events unfolded, Hendrix's performance was rescheduled for that evening. After consultation with Mike Jeffrey, the event's producers postponed Hendrix's headlining performance to Monday morning, despite the festival originally concluding on the Sunday evening. We were told that we were due on at the festival at 11 o'clock on the last night. The plan was to leave at about 8 and go to the local airfield and get a helicopter in yet another army maneuver. By 8 o'clock, it was absolutely pissing down with rain, no flights. We had to drive, which was a good long way. It's still pissing down, and there was a hurricane blowing. Of course, the roads were jammed. No one was in a great humor when we finally got there, especially as we stepped of the car into about 2 feet of mud. The next thing was that the organizers told us that they're running about 3 hours late. Wonderful. They also said that all the caravans were occupied, so we sort of shuffled on stage. I remember seeing Crosby, Stills and Nash in an attempt to get on somehow. That failed, and in the end they pointed out this cottage we could shelter in. It was about 3 muddy fields away. So we squelched over there and spent the rest of the night literally freezing in there. We're not talking fun here. As the sun rose higher in the sky on the Monday morning, the 18th of August, it was now time to bring the Woodstock Music and Art Fair to a close. Originally, festival promoter Michael Lang tried and failed to book cowboy legend Roy Rogers, whose Happy Trails may well have been a poignant, if somewhat bizarre, closing number for that tumultuous weekend. Finally, after successive scheduling delays, Hendrix took the stage at 9 a.m. By this time, the crowd had largely dispersed and returning to their regular scheduled lives, although there was a certain glow to each and every one of them. Hendrix looked remarkably relaxed and composed as he walked to the microphone and casually remarked, "I see that we meet again." After correcting Chip Monk, who had introduced the group as the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Jimi and his retinue launched into a new song, Message to the Universe, later titled Message to Love, and later released on the live album Band of Gypsies in 1970. The group worked fairly well together, with a full sound dominated by Hendrix's white Fender Stratocaster. Another unfamiliar song followed with Getting My Heart Back Together, a song that would go unreleased on an album during Hendrix's lifetime, but which had been a regular live number for the past several months. Retreating to the familiar, Hendrix pulled out an exuberant version of Spanish Castle Magic from the Axis album, in which he traded off solos with Larry Lee, and even gave the spotlight over to Mitch Mitchell for a brief drum break. Next came Hendrix's beloved slow blues, Red House, from his debut album, Are You Experienced, in 1967, but which had only just been released in the US the previous month, on the compilation Smash Hits. Larry Lee was given a lengthy guitar solo, though unfortunately, his Les Paul suffered from major tuning and intonation issues, which he would never quite recover from for the entirety of the performance. Larry was then given a chance to take a lead vocal with his self-penned ballad, Mastermind. Feeling the need to take things up a notch, Hendrix abruptly launched into Lover Man, another unreleased tune that would be familiar to experienced audience veterans, as Hendrix had been playing it live for the previous 2 years. With the crowd yelling for more familiar material, Jimi delivered the goods with a searing rendition of Foxy Lady from his first album, pulling out his catalogue of crowd-pleasing bumping and grinding guitar tricks. The set continued with 2 brand new numbers. Beginning, aka Jam Back at the House, was a monstrous and complex riff-based instrumental that featured another drum solo from Mitchell, while the anti-war anthem Isabella grooved along in a most appealing and offbeat manner, giving the audience a glimpse at the progressive fusion Hendrix envisioned for his future work. It was now ballad time, with Larry Lee again, as he got soulful on a medley of 2 Curtis Mayfield and the Impression songs, Gypsy Woman and Aware of Love. By this time, the crowd was still shouting out requests for various oldies, and Jimi obliged them with a rousing version of Fire from his first album. It was now time to take it on home. For this purpose, Hendrix lit into his standard closing number, Voodoo Child's Slight Return, from his 1968 album, Electric Ladyland. This extended into a jam with Jimi trading off solos with Larry Lee. As this wound down, he advised the audience that you could leave if you want to. We're just jamming, that's all. This wound down to the crashing final chord, and then suddenly, and without warning the band, Hendrix hit upon the opening notes to the US national anthem, The Star-Spangled Banner. The band tried to follow Hendrix's lead briefly, but then wisely chose to lay out as he created magic. His masterful instrumental rendition of the anthem managed to convey the feeling of turmoil that gripped America at the time. Nightmare visions of war and destruction swept over the crowd before he brought it back to earth with a peaceful reading of the final lines of the piece. This was a truly astonishing performance, and one that would become one of the most enduring of all Woodstock moments and memories. But Jimi Hendrix was not finished. To the delight of the crowd, he proceeded non-stop into the classic Purple Haze from his first album, delivering a mighty rendition of this golden oldie, which was enhanced by the obvious magic he had just created. This settled into a lengthy instrumental improvisation, with Jimi running unaccompanied through a variety of riffs and styles. Finally, he brought the main set to a close with Villanova Junction, a slow and mournful instrumental blues that seemed like a requiem for the entire weekend. With that, Jimi left the stage with a simple "thank you." The crowd wasted no time in demanding more, however, and Hendrix quickly returned. Although he had wanted to play another new song, Valleys of Neptune, he gave in to the crowd's demand for the familiar and closed out his performance, and Woodstock as a whole, with a strong rendition of his first single, Hey Joe, sounding somewhat incongruous in light of what had come before it. With that, an exhausted chipmunk bade the crowd farewell with a sweet, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much. It's been a delight seeing you. May we wish you anything that the person next to you wishes for you. Good wishes, a good day, and a good life. Thank you." The denizens of Woodstock Nation returned home transformed, well aware of the cultural revolution that they had helped create. As one critic wrote, Woodstock, the legendary Aquarian exposition of 1969, conjures images of a massive crowd, Hendrix's iconic rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner, and Hendrix himself, a symbol of the hippie movement. However, the reality of Hendrix's Woodstock performance was far from the romanticized image. Playing in the early morning hours before a dwindling crowd in muddy conditions, Hendrix's set was chaotic yet groundbreaking. Despite facing technical and weather delays, Hendrix took the stage to a reduced audience and embarked on a musical journey punctuated by new songs and experimental sounds. Hendrix's guitar prowess shone through, creating sounds never heard before in music. With his Marshall amplification and effects in sync, his guitar work was stunning. He launched into a set marked by improvisation and innovation. Throughout the set, Hendrix's guitar mastery was evident, even amidst equipment challenges and experimentation. His rendition of The Star-Spangled Banner was a sonic revelation, reflecting the turmoil of the times. As the set progressed, Hendrix delved into a medley of musical genres, from funk to blues, pushing the boundaries of sound and performance. The audience was treated to a mesmerizing display of Hendrix's virtuosity, culminating in the hauntingly beautiful Villanova Junction. With a simple thank you, Hendrix left the stage, leaving the audience transformed by the experience. Despite the challenges, his Woodstock performance remains a testament to his musical genius and enduring legacy. Hendrix author Frank Moriarty wrote, Hendrix's instrumental version of the Star-Spangled Banner marks an incredible harmonic convergence of on the verge of uncontrolled feedback amplification, electronic effects, a resonant Fender Stratocaster, unseen vibrations in the air, and the immense talent of the man directing this massive sonic force. Jimi Hendrix, he goes on to say, colors with sound, somehow able to illustrate the anthem lyrics with the motions of his hands manipulating the 6 strings, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air. Jimi leads your ears into the combustion, riding the tremolo bar across the skies depicted by Francis Scott Key. It is a singular musical creation, and the remaining Woodstock crowd was fully awestruck by a nearly symphonic statement that so passionately reflected the cultural and political climate of the era. While noted author, journalist, and music critic Charles Shaar Murray had this to say, "The Star-Spangled Banner is probably the most complex and powerful work of American art to deal with the Vietnam War and its corrupting, distorting effect on later generations of the American psyche. One man, with one guitar, said more in 3.5 minutes about that peculiarly disgusting war and its reverberations than all the novels, memoirs, and movies put together." Hendrix's friend, music journalist and author, Sharon Lawrence recounts the following story. A respected middle-aged cinematographer named Dave Myers was there, at Woodstock, as part of the film crew. During the exhausting weekend, Myers' bed was directly under the trailer that served as Jimi's dressing room, while Myers shot many important sequences that weekend, including the famous garbage pickup footage He Got a Break when Jimi and his band took the stage. "I was on stage, a few feet from Jimi," he remembers, crouched down and purely an enthusiastic listener. Sunrise went on for a long time. The sun came up directly in front of Jimi as he played The Star-Spangled Banner. This was an extraordinary culmination to the festival, and I felt very privileged to see and hear Hendrix. "Was he playing to the cameras?" Sharon asked. "Oh no," Myers said. "He was playing for himself, concentrating like I've never seen anyone concentrate before. It was all in his fingers, his beautiful magic fingers." Following the Woodstock performance, and in the midst of the bustling backstage scene at Woodstock, Jimi managed to slip away from his management and evade a scheduled appearance on the Dick Cavett Show later that same day. Bob Levine recalled the frantic efforts to locate Hendrix, stating, "The plan was to bring him down right after Woodstock ended, so he could give viewers a first-hand account of the festival, but Jerry Stickles and I couldn't reach him." Cavitt's show was live at the time, and he repeatedly announced while on air, "Hendrix should be here any minute now." However, after an hour and a half passed with no sign of Hendrix, Cavitt was understandably disappointed. Levine adds, Hendrix believed the appearance had been cancelled due to his delayed performance at Woodstock. Despite promising to make it up to Cavitt, the missed opportunity left a lasting negative impression on the host. According to John McDermott, following the Woodstock performance, Hendrix left with Leslie Adair. "We left by helicopter," she remembers. Jimmy was tired, cold and hungry. We had adjoining rooms at the hotel, and as soon as we checked in, I volunteered to find some food. He was unhappy with his performance and just wanted to get away where no one could find him. The hotel was filled with people who had come over from the festival, and when I came back, I heard a great deal of commotion in his room and peeked through the door. There were a number of people getting high who were not there in Jimmy's best interests. After they left, I went back to check on him, and he had passed out on the bed with a cigarette going. It had burned a large hole through his sheet before going out. He was fortunate he hadn't been killed. We were so looking forward to playing. We knew it was going to be a huge event, because the talk had gone around the town for weeks while we were rehearsing. But we were kept hanging around for hours. The mud and rain didn't help, and the bands didn't really mix, because if you were lucky enough to have a caravan, you stayed there. Our enthusiasm dried up even more when it became apparent we were to get on stage not Sunday night as planned, but in the very early hours of Sunday morning. We finally did get on about 6 a.m. Monday. Great. Having waited up all night, the audience understandably seemed as groggy as we were, and it was horrible to see people packing up and leaving as we came on. Monday morning was back to the grind for a lot of people who'd come, and it couldn't be helped. It was so cold and damp at that time in the morning that none of our numbers really gelled. They just turned into long jams. There were lots of stops and starts. We hadn't rehearsed or planned to do Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock, but we often played it in America. It's become associated with Woodstock, and that's fine, but we did play it a lot. Sometimes I stuck in a few drums, sometimes not, but I did at Woodstock to keep my hands warm. It was a real anticlimax. If only we could have gone on at night. There was no camaraderie when we came off. Most of the others had gone. We had a long drive ahead of us, and we wanted to get home. People go on about Woodstock almost religiously, but really it was mud, no food, no toilets, and exhaustion. Back in New York, on Friday, August 22nd, Jimmy attended a press conference and was interviewed at Frank's Restaurant in Harlem, organized by the United Block Association and filmed by WTN TV. Then, from August 21st to August 25th, there were jams and rehearsals at the Shokan House, followed by Tuesday, August 26th, at the Hit Factory Studios in New York City for studio recordings. And finally, to conclude the month, from the 28th through 30th of August, more studio recordings took place at the Hit Factory, working on tracks including Message to Universe, Isabella, Lover Man, and Burning Desire, Machine Gun, Message to the Universe, Me, Sky Blues Today, and Mastermind. That concludes this installment of the series. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we will begin the deep dive into September and October 1969 of the Jimi Hendrix story. Don't forget to subscribe for future content updates. And by the way, if you have any photos, stories, or anecdotes to contribute, we would love to hear from you. Until next time,